Hey guys, welcome back to my truck as I drive out to Plain City where I'm going to start a bike ride today. It's actually going to be my first official ride on my new bike. I did one in the rain the other day, but I don't think that one counts. So that's why I'm wearing this kind of ridiculous shirt. This is one of my cycling jerseys. I like to be seen and I like to represent America. So that's what we're doing today. But I figured I got a little time while I'm driving today, and free time is not something I have a lot of here recently. So I figured I would record another video while I was driving for you. The video topic for today is going to revolve around my interactions with police officers before I became a cop. One very popular criticism that I get from people is that I don't understand how regular civilians feel when they're interacting with police, because I'm a cop and because everything I do comes from the mindset of a police officer. And it's kind of funny because it's simply not true. I do know what it's like to be a regular civilian interacting with the police because I have not always been a police officer. And I also think that one of the things that makes me particularly good at my job and the way that I do my job, there's other people that are good at their job too, but they're good for different reasons. One of the things that makes me good at doing my job is that I think I'm particularly skilled at putting myself in other people's shoes when I'm dealing with them. And I think that comes across in my interactions with people when you're watching body camera footage. Because I'm not thinking about it from my perspective as much as I'm thinking about it from their perspective, or at least I try to. And one of the things that I've got actually, I think, 2 stories today that I want to tell you about interactions that I had with police officers before I became one. And this is actually kind of long before I ever even considered becoming a police officer. The first one that I want to talk about, and these might come across kind of boring, but these are real interactions that I had, because I hear from people all the time about their negative interactions with police officers. This is something that is very common. For some reason, it's like an unwritten law that when you run into somebody and you find out that they're a police officer, you're compelled to tell them stories about bad interactions you had with police officers. And those bad interactions you had with police officers generally come from traffic stops. So those are the stories that I'm going to talk about today. The first one that I had, and it's kind of funny because I also get this, I'm a military policeman, or I was trained as military police, so I know what your guys' training is, and yada, yada, yada. No, you don't know how police are trained. Being a military police officer is not being a police officer at all. But regardless, this was an encounter I had with the police after I went to basic training, and I was a military police officer working in the civilian world, and I got stopped by the police. This was way back in the day, probably 1999, shortly after I got home from basic training. I was working at an Applebee's, and I worked late. I would close the restaurant down at night. And then I was still living with my parents at the time. So there wasn't an Applebee's in my town, and I lived in a rural area. I have to drive from one town back to my hometown. It was about a 35-minute drive. And when I was driving home, I'd come back on country roads. Now, back in the day, you guys are getting a whole lot of information about me. Back in the day, I drove a 1995 Dodge Neon, a 4-door strawberry red Dodge Neon 5-speed. Not the fastest car in the world, not fast by any means, but it was a good running car, especially a good car for me, being my first car that I ever bought. And I'm driving down this country road at about 2 in the morning because I just closed down Applebee's. I was 19 or 20 years old, so I was not yet old enough to drive. And I was speeding. It's 2 in the morning. I was going, I don't know, 65, I don't remember what he clocked me at, but 65, 70 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone down a country road. And up ahead of me, I see in a church parking lot 2 sheriff's deputies parked doing that Cruiser 69, where they're sitting there talking to each other. They must have been running radar at the same time. And as soon as I got within a few hundred yards of them, you could tell that they put their car into gear. I could see the parking lights go through, and they turn on the headlights, and they're getting ready to come out on the road. So I knew for a fact that they had just clocked me, and I knew for a fact that I was speeding. So before they even exited the parking lot, I had a kind of a little chuckle with myself. I was like, damn it, I just got busted. I pulled off to the side of the road, took off my seatbelt, reached into my glove box, had my license, registration, and insurance in hand with the windows down and my dome light on. So I'm already on the side of the road. A deputy pulls up behind me with his lights on, walks up to the cruiser, tells me that he pulled me over for speeding, asked for my information that I was literally already holding in the door. I told him, hey man, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get home from work. This dipshit deputy stands there and starts lecturing me about wearing my seatbelt. I said, I got you for speeding, but you're also not wearing your seatbelt, so you're gonna get a ticket for that. That started an argument with me and him. I said I was definitely wearing my seatbelt when I was driving, because if I'm not wearing my seatbelt, there's an alarm that goes off in the car and I can't stand hearing that alarm, so I always have my seatbelt buckled. I said, listen, my glove box is hanging open over there. That's where I got my license and registration, well, my registration and insurance from. That should be obvious. You know, why are you harassing me about my seatbelt? And he just kept going on and on. And it was two deputies. There's a male deputy on the driver's side, female deputy, because they pulled both their cars up. She's on the other side looking in my car with a flashlight. They told me to roll my window down. I had crank windows. I had to reach over the car, roll my window down so she could see what was going on, even though I had zero window tint. You know, it was annoying as hell. Now I can tell you that I guess if I'm trying to be generous, I would say the reason that he was doing this was because he was trying to stop drunk drivers in the middle of the night. You know, it's about 2 in the morning, which is like drunk driver time. And I think he was trying to get me to talk more so he could tell whether or not I was intoxicated, see if he could get smell of alcohol off my breath, see if I was going to slur my words or do anything stupid like that. I hadn't had anything to drink. I was not of legal drinking age. I'm pretty sure at that time I didn't even drink illegally because I was like a Boy Scout growing up and I never did anything wrong. I was freaking pissed off, you know, and so they wrote me for speeding and for no seatbelt. And I ended up having to go into court and I got the whole thing dropped. Well, no, I went into court and I think it was just a magistrate at the time. And I didn't have to get an attorney or anything. I told the judge, I was like, listen, I was speeding. He pulled me over for speeding. I got no problem paying that fine. But, you know, the seatbelt thing is bullshit because I was wearing my seatbelt the whole time. Judge didn't really even care. He just dismissed the seatbelt ticket and gave me the speeding. Now, I've heard more recently, like since becoming a police officer, this isn't a tactic that I do because I don't really give a shit if I write a ticket and somebody pleads to it or if it gets dismissed, whatever. If I'm writing a ticket to somebody, it's because I have to. The only time I write tickets are usually when there's a traffic crash and the parties are disputing who's at fault. So I'll write a ticket to the at-fault party that's assigned to the insurance companies that, hey, look, a police officer judged this scenario and he made the determination that this person is at fault. Therefore, you know, the other person, you have to claim responsibility. Aside from that, I basically don't write tickets. The last ticket I wrote was for a guy that blew by a school bus that was stopped on the side of the road with a stop sign out, but, you know, regardless. But I've heard that state troopers will often cite you for speeding and for license plate, or for seatbelt, because when you go to court, the judge will dismiss the speed if you plead to the seatbelt, and the troopers, for some reason, give a shit about conviction rates on their traffic tickets. So if they write you for the seatbelt, then that's a non-moving violation, it's a non-point violation. They look at that as a gift. I don't know if that's what the deputy was doing when they stopped me and were harassing me, but I was incredibly annoyed by it. It just really pissed me off. So I've been in that situation before. I've had those interactions with police officers before. Another situation, I'm getting closer to my end here, so I want to go faster. But another situation I had is when I was in college, and this was after the war, right before I went back with Blackwater, or at least after my first deployment to Iraq, right before I went back over to Iraq with Blackwater. I came back home and I was working 2 jobs. I was working at a restaurant called Bravo, an Italian restaurant, in the morning for the lunch service. And then in the evening, I was working at Champs down by campus at the Lennox Center. And I would usually close the restaurant down. My classes in college were always on like Mondays and Wednesdays. I go from school basically from 7:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night on Mondays and Wednesdays. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would work doubles at work. And I think I'd work 3 doubles a week, and then I had 2 days for studying. That was my schedule throughout college. So one day I got off late from my lunch job, and I was in a hurry to get to my evening job. I ran home, changed my clothes real quick. I jumped on my motorcycle. I had a crotch rocket, a Suzuki GSX-R 750. And I had to be at work in like 10 minutes, and it's a 20-minute drive. So I jumped on my bike and jumped on the ramp from Henderson Road to 315 southbound. And, you know, there's a couple things that happen when you're on a bike. When you're on an on-ramp and it's curvy, you have a tendency to lay on the throttle a little bit because it's fun. You get to lean the bike over a little bit. Plus, I was in a hurry and there was some rain clouds coming. So I was on that ramp, and I think I got clocked at 75 miles an hour, 75 or 80 miles an hour on the ramp as I was merging onto the freeway. As I come off the ramp, I see the officer standing outside his car with his radar, checking cars as they're coming up. I see him run to the driver's seat of his car. I knew for a fact right then, you know, this guy just got me. So I had already merged onto the highway. I was in the center lane when I see the lights coming up. I was like, all right, this guy's coming for me. I went ahead and took my hands off of the handlebars, and I was sitting back with my hands kind of like this, just cruising, looking in the mirror. And this guy came up on me so fast that he had to slam on his brakes. He almost took me out because he thought for sure that I was going to run. But I wasn't going to run because I'm a good guy. You know, I'm an honest person. I could have, now knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have stopped. But, you know, this was back in 2004. So policies were probably a little bit different then. They were probably allowed to chase people back then. But, you know, I was just sitting up. I was cruising. I was letting the bike naturally slow down. I kicked it into neutral. It became obvious that he was pulling me over, so I pulled off the side of the road. Pulled off the side of the road, took my helmet off, set it on my bike, flipped around backwards, was facing the cruiser with my license and registration and insurance in my hand because I carried out my wallet when I was on the bicycle or on the motorcycle. He comes running up to my car and just starts screaming at me about reckless operation and how many motorcycles he's scraped off the side of the road, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, okay, man. I was like, here's my stuff. Write me my ticket. I'm on the way to work. I'm in a hurry. And I think he even asked me, like, why are you driving so damn fast? And I told him, like, well, I'm in college. I work one job in the morning. I work another job in the evening. I'm running late for my evening job, and it's about to rain. So I'm sorry, I was speeding. He goes back to the car. It starts to rain. So now I'm sitting on my motorcycle with my helmet off, facing backwards to a police officer who's sitting in his cruiser, and he flags me back. He's like, hey, come here. So I come back to the car, I'm getting my ticket, and I think it was 80 in a 55 mile an hour zone. And he tells me, I cited you for reckless operation of a motor vehicle. And I looked at him. I go, what the fuck did you do? I'm standing outside his window holding my helmet, and he starts yelling at me about I was driving so fast, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm sitting out here in the rain while your lazy fucking ass is sitting in your cruiser. You're gonna write me for reckless operation of a motor vehicle when I did everything that you asked me to do, compliant, blah, blah, blah. And this fucking pussy says, dude, you better get out of here. It's starting to rain. So I took my fucking ticket, went to work. I got to work late. I remember one of the managers of the restaurant at that particular time was this fat woman. And she ended up getting fired. And she goes, oh, you're all wet because you rode your motorcycle in the rain. And I looked at her, I go, shut your fucking mouth, bitch. And I was pissed off. And, you know, so I've had those interactions, you know, that's kind of the moral of the story. I don't want to elaborate too much. That particular one, that really pissed me off because I went to court and I approached the prosecutor and I said, hey, I would like to plead guilty to the speed, max points, but take the reckless op, because I got charged with reckless op and speed. And she said, do you have an attorney? I said, no. She goes, okay. When I got called up, the judge said, oh, it looks like you're requesting continuance. I said, no, I'm not requesting a continuance. I offered a plea deal to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor said, you know, with this level of charge, if he doesn't have representation, I'm not willing to accept a plea. It's like, okay. So then I had to go through all this stuff. I had to go get a public defender. I had to continue the case multiple times. Had to turn in my tax documents and all this other stuff. It was incredibly frustrating. And sorry, I'm going into a town different way than I normally do. I think I need to go that way. Oh, yeah, coming up soon. Anyway, so I had to go through all this stuff, get a public defender, tell him what I wanted. He goes, okay, that sounds reasonable. When we went to court, again, with him, the judge was like, how do you plead? I was like, not guilty. And the dipshit officer that wrote me my reckless hop ticket, staying in the back of the court, he goes, oh, I didn't do it, Your Honor. Like, really loud. This guy's a fucking dickhead. And he worked for the organization that I eventually went to work for. I never got to meet him. I should look him up, find him, but I'm pretty sure he's retired by now. We went up, and the other thing about that is I needed to resolve this ticket because I had already gotten a job with Blackwater, and I was about to go back overseas. And I had told that to this public defender and everything. We get up to see the judge, and the judge asks, like, you know, what we have or whatever. Like, I think we went to the prosecutor together and talked to them, and the attorney tried to speak for me, but he was such a bumbling freaking moron that I ended up cutting him off. And because he was like, you know, this man has served our country and blah, 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 but he didn't actually know anything about me or know what it was that I was doing. So I literally had to cut him off. And I told the judge, I'm like, hey, Your Honor, I just want to resolve the situation. I got home from Iraq about 6 months ago, and I'm set to go back again. And I don't want this hanging over my head. That's why I offered to take a plea for the speed with max points as long as you drop the reckless op. The judge had no problem with that. Looked at the prosecutor had no problem with that. So it was resolved. But it was a situation where I had a police officer that put me through a whole bunch of stuff that didn't need to be put through based on the way I was acting, you know? So when people tell me that I don't know what it's like to be on the other side of things because I'm a police officer, you're dead wrong. I have been on the other side of things several times. There's probably more encounters that I haven't told you guys about because I'm pulling up to my location right now. But the fact of the matter is I have been on that side of things multiple times. And those encounters actually have helped shape and mold the type of police officer that I chose to be, and that I keep in mind daily. And that when I'm dealing with the public and I'm reviewing these situations and I'm trying to determine why people responded the way they did or reacted the way they did, and talking about officers' reactions and officers' response to certain incidents, I'm doing it from the perspective of someone that hasn't always been a cop. I'm somebody that has been on the other side of things before. I do understand what's going through people's heads when they're in these situations. So since everybody feels that they're compelled to tell me their negative cop interaction story every time I meet someone, I figured I would do the same for you. And with that, I have arrived at the Dear Dutchman in Plain City. I'm going to go for my bike ride. I'll talk to you guys later.